Welcome, everybody. We are here for another podcast with Jaws and Jennifer A. Whitaker for Jaws Coffee Chat at Mental Health Awareness. Yeah, I'll be able to speak here in a minute. We have
good one.
Yeah, we have with us our wonderful leader, Jennifer A. Whitaker, to talk about some mental health issues. Before we get started, we'd like to have special thanks to some people for replaying our shows on their platforms. Lawrence Wingate of Wingate TV, Marcus Hart of Transform You Media, Zach Clayton of the PAC Channel, and Jay Stoyan of the Disability Channel. We so appreciate their replays of our podcasts on their channels. I'm going to take it straight to Jennifer, who is off camera today due to location and signal, but take it away, Jennifer.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
And we lost audio. She'll be back in just a second. There she is. We lost your audio there for a second.
I was wondering what happened. It just asked me to go live stream again. It's this whole luck with technology. Even though I'm in the middle of a big city, in the middle of big Houston, fourth largest city in the U.S., and I can't get signal.
This week, I guess we could blame it on the Canadian fires and all the air pollution.
Canadian fires are sitting down all their smoke, and now smoking in Houston. Yeah, maybe they're burning some power lines or some internet signal satellites. They're really smoking, and they're destroying this whole universe. Because think what damage would be done if we didn't have internet modern day.
Yep.
If they actually were to reach where the fire was huge enough, it burnt high enough to get the satellites that are out there in space, circling the Earth, that would be catastrophic, worse than the pandemic kind of catastrophic.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Because at least with the pandemic, we still had the internet.
Exactly. Can you imagine what mental health would be without the internet? It was bad enough during the pandemic. But you take away the internet and way to interact with people, and we'd feel like we were back in the Stone Ages.
That's funny, but not. But if you really think about it, we kind of had a point that that the internet was kind of all we had with the lockdown. But then there's that when the internet was all we had, we were supposedly already in a mental health crisis before the pandemic. And then it exasperated the whole and exaggerated the whole mental health crisis. And then some people have got comfortable with that pandemic sort of thing of not leaving their house and everything's digital. They order their groceries and everything else online. And yet there has to be some people that interact in public and actually go places, because there's people that deliver our groceries when we want to order it online, right?
Right.
And other things like that are what we count on, like the Amazon delivery people. That how many of us shop on Amazon for something, even if it's only once in a blue moon?
Yeah.
So how many tens of thousands of people are the ones delivering our goods because we can just go on Amazon and click buy now? So if we didn't have even though there's a lot more people that are staying more remote and virtual, not just work, but even their social life, like the Bible study I go to that's online, those are remote now. So the leader of that church or ministry, whatever you don't think of it, she doesn't have to have the overhead of a building and the different staff to run the building while she's giving seminars or whatever, the worship service. But instead, she just has to have a Zoom account that's a paid account, and however many people can join in from wherever. So we have people, like she's in Dallas, I'm in Houston, then two girls are from Colorado, but they're two different parts. Another's from Oklahoma, and I don't even know where else, but we're all from not just like different parts of town, but even different states and major cities.
Mm-hmm.
So she's got the bigger group she can reach because she's remote. But then again, that goes to she doesn't have real reason to even leave her house, does she?
No.
And so some of that I hold responsible for why the mental health crisis didn't end. Because they say now there's therapists and all these other people just booked to their max. Even some of the worst the worst therapists, the worst psychiatrists, and whatever else are all just maxed out in their booking.
Yep.
Like their schedule and stuff. And some of them you try to get on, then it's got to be 6 months out before they can see you, even if they know you're in, a urgent situation with suicide or something. And that's how desperate our communities are for mental health services and how much they're suffering. But in spite of having our social life back, at least the opportunity, the freedom to roam about town, like me when I come to this coffee house, try to, have a little podcast. I mean, I'm virtual with you, but then I'm at least in person with the people here.
Right.
Okay, so, like there's people like me that I know are a lot of other people on their computers out here doing meetings. So that sense of interaction, because you're at least all in a public place together, even though you're minding your own business. And then there's the actual interaction of, say, when I go to my gym in the morning, and we're actually communicating and talking about stuff and partnering up in workouts that require 2 or more people. There's an actual interaction. But how many people, in spite of that being back, are still staying at their houses like the lockdown never ended? And I'm looking at this with concern of how many people have the depression, like what I had last week where I was not leaving my house. I didn't even hardly leave that recliner that I was in the whole time, besides going to the bathroom. And I got so deep that I didn't even realize I was depressed.
Right.
I was just a little discouraged, or like I felt like I was just tired. Then I felt like I was a bit moody, like, I was irritable, but I didn't know that I was depressed. And then here's my mom telling me over the weekend, I texted y'all, okay, let's get out, go to some of our favorite restaurants, and let's get you dessert, okay? And they actually pushed me to get out of the house because they know I have to interact with the public to gain my happiness. Well, how many introverts especially go through that and don't know they're depressed? And because they don't, they stay in that situation unless they have that support system like mine to tell them, hey, you need to get up and get out. Even if we go with you and we drive you wherever, you need to get up and get out and be social.
Yep.
And it's so dangerous, this whole remote working. It's a joy because more people like me and you can do jobs that otherwise couldn't because we couldn't leave the house, or we, like in my case, can't drive. And part of the reason I was declared disabled is not just regularly missing work, like you've seen with my conditions, but even I don't have transportation. And before the pandemic, nobody considered Uber reliable transportation. So say, oh, well, yeah, you can Uber, but no, we can't hire you because it doesn't count as reliable transportation.
Right.
I don't know, but they didn't. And that's part of the reason I was considered disabled, because I had, with my issues, my different medical conditions, I had no right to have a license. It was illegal. And so I would be disqualified from every job I applied to based on, if nothing else, the sole fact that I didn't have transportation. And so they'd find me unreliable because I couldn't show up since I didn't have reliable transportation.
Right.
Well, then we sometime in that period got Uber, and it got more known and more available. Still, that hasn't transitioned to where it's considered reliable transportation. So then we go back to okay, so that's still in transition. So those people that are in my situation now can work remotely. But if they're working remotely, they often lose the social circle they had because they used to get out.
Definitely.
And it's harder to develop a social circle when you're in that downward spiral of the depression and you don't know that's what you're in. So you stay at home by yourself, even like me in the same spot, neglecting our hygiene, neglecting a lot of other stuff that's, ourselves or our responsibilities. And it goes spiraling further downward.
Yep.
And the further downward we go, is the blinder we get to the fact that we are downward.
Yeah. When my depression was at its height, there was one time I remember saying to my husband, I was like, oh man, I just feel like curling up in a corner. And he goes, please don't do that. You disappear for 3 weeks when you do that. I had no idea. I thought I hid it better than that, but I could be open with him. But he's like, no, you don't. You're gone for 3 weeks. I'm like,
But doesn't that say how much he loves you and how much he pays attention?
Exactly.
Because when they see, whoever are they, in my case, it's both of my moms, okay? It's both of my sisters. It's, my different family members. When they see something that they know is, quote, not me, which is, in other words, me going through some kind of medical or mental health crisis, some kind of episodes are acting up, they make it known. I'm not saying like to public, but like we were at a
but they pointed out to you.
We were at a well, what I was going to say is they point out to each other, and often I overhear. Like one was when we were at this bar that's got like a Ferris wheel and a few other things that were child appropriate, so it's kind of like a family place, but a lot of it was like bar and restaurant.
Right.
So we're sitting outdoors, and I'm kind of in the social circle of give or take 12 of us family members, and I'm just kind of reading my magazines and doing my own thing, but not really engaging. Well, I thought since I came to the event, I must be doing pretty well. Then my two sisters, one of them, I think it was my little sister, asked most, she said, Elisa, does it look like Elaine is depressed? She says, I'm worried about Elaine. And so I zoomed in. I just focused on their conversation because I overheard that. There's something about when you hear your name. Right?
Yeah.
So I heard my name and I focused in on that conversation, even though there's other people having other conversations around. And my older sister said, yeah, I think something's going on with her because she's been, and then she goes into different signs that she's seen. That's that same thing like your husband said, that he notices certain things you do, and those certain things that sometimes are what you do is the not doing what you normally would.
Exactly.
Like with my case, it was the not socializing while I'm an extrovert. And there were other things like that, that's the doing was actually not doing. Certain things I'd usually do and be out there just social butterfly. In this case, I was staying all secluded to myself, reading magazines and not even socializing with my own family. And we're like a pretty close-knit circle.
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting. Those are things we see that we can sometimes see easier in other people than ourselves.
Yeah. It's like I thought I hid it pretty well, and apparently I did not because others saw it. I just thought I wasn't visible.
And then looking back at last week, could you see some stuff about me that was unusual?
You were more subdued, yeah.
Okay, so see, I didn't know that. But see, that's where you, as working with me from a business perspective, could say, well, yeah, she attended the appointments, but she was a little more subdued or whatever. That's still, even though you and I don't spend that much time online together, that you could still, within that limited time frame, see some kind of difference. So see, these are all interesting things that I think our listeners need to know about. That's why, in other words, not only do we need to develop a social circle, but we need to get out of the house. Or like in my case, get out of that recliner and go do other things in the house. Or go sit in the sun if you're depressed, because that actually has natural reactions of stimulating the brain when you accept sun. Like your body is tanning and stuff, the skin tans, the brain produces happy tablets. They're like serotonin and dopamine that are the natural happy pill.
Right, and the vitamin D.
And well, vitamin D is produced, but it's not connected to depression.
No? Okay.
Serotonin and dopamine are what my psychiatrist said is what is a happy pill that's produced by the sun. It does produce vitamin D, but vitamin D has other uses. That's why you don't see psychiatrists telling you to take a vitamin D tablet.
Well, yeah, there is that.
I mean, there's some science behind it. And my psychiatrist is one of those that actually does encourage use of natural stuff when it would benefit. And she goes to first natural stuff and then prescription.
Right.
If natural stuff doesn't work. And so with her, she's told me, as far as natural supplements, B12 and magnesium are good choices for depression if you want to go the whole holistic stuff.
Right.
And think about it, all energy drinks and other stuff that creates energy in us, even if it's not healthy, haven't you noticed they all have B12?
Yeah.
So does that say something about it stimulates the brain?
Stimulates the brain, stimulates the energy.
Right. But why do we get tired when we're depressed unless there's a correlation between energy and happiness?
Yep.
Happiness needs to be the source, not overdoses of caffeine, right?
Right.
But still that energy comes with stimulation. And when you stimulate the brain, I mean, don't you agree the brain that we use to do our work or functions through the day is the same brain that produces our serotonin and dopamine?
Yeah.
So if it's stimulated, it's stimulated. So it increases activity, which is we experience to be more alert, but the activity is also like psychological stuff of the serotonin and dopamine producing. But then there's also, you and I know this one, if we get too much of serotonin, okay, whether it's caffeine or it's B12 or it's magnesium, if we get too much, we also know we get anxious.
Yeah.
So there's the lack of serotonin and dopamine that can be resolved with vitamin B12 and energy drinks that have a lot of B12 or other stuff. And then there's the extreme high of you have too much and you're anxious.
And often anxiety looks like depression and depression looks like anxiety. So you've got to find
That
your
is a
own
good
triggers to know
That
which
is a good
which.
point.
Yep.
How many people can actually tell the difference in anxiety and depression? That's what I want to know.
I know I couldn't.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I actually, when I came here earlier today, I had just gone trying to get a tour of a, what do we call that? Something arts, martial arts. I was trying to get a tour of a specific martial arts gym or whatever you call that place, right?
Dojo.
And so it didn't go well because apparently the guy who's the owner wanted the manager to give me a tour, and the manager would just say stuff that was off the wall in response to a question I asked, and I could tell very well her response was not even on the same topic as my question. And I was pretty serious about getting a membership and starting to do some of those workouts.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm thinking his business has to be pretty well because he's got probably 40 people there that were at that, all gathered for that 12 o'clock class that was during the business hours when so many of us would be working, right?
Right.
So that's usually the slow time of the day for those kind of businesses, and he had a crowd. I'm thinking he must be pretty good, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, so it didn't sit well with me that she was not answering my questions, and she was giving off these wall kind of responses that don't even have to do the same topic. So I got a bit worked up.
Yeah.
Well, then there goes to when I Uber and I head over this way to just kind of get to the next place and start working on my stuff for the day, that I was thinking about death. I really was.
Hmm.
And I started drinking, 4 shots of caffeine, like regular coffee, shots of coffee.
Right.
They're higher in caffeine. And I noticed the thoughts of death and suicide were lingering. And then I went to drink something else and something else. And then lo and behold, I never would have guessed. I must have been anxious, because then when I finally said, okay, I need to just try taking my Atarax, that's my take as needed for anxiety. And those thoughts went away.
Nice.
So I thought, like you said, I thought that I was depressed. And that incident this morning with the martial arts place being my trigger.
Right.
And when I'm thinking about suicide and death, I'm thinking maybe I'm depressed. And who would have even known, like you said, that it was actually anxiety?
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, so I used the wrong chemicals. I was stimulating my brain, trying to increase it. And it turned out it was overstimulated by that activity.
Right.
And then I started journaling, and I'm like, I must actually be bothered to be, my keyword was upset. I'm not the one that gets upset enough to say like pissed or anything like that. I just kind of say upset or frustrated. And,
right.
I don't get the kind of upset that's enough to use those other words. And so anyways, I was like, okay, I'm going to try my journaling, because I read in this magazine about mental health awareness. And it's about supposedly the awareness of the chemicals and good coping skills and methods. And one of the ones I found when I first started the magazine this weekend was journaling your thoughts. So journaling your thoughts. And I said, I'm going to try this, because the magazine was saying journaling it helps you relieve it as though you had talked to somebody about it, while still keeping it confidential if it's something that you need to relieve yourself of and don't want others to know about.
Right.
Some kind of secret or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I need to try this and see how it works as far as between sessions with my therapist. And maybe, when I have my different ups and downs, I can kind of vent it on paper. And, it's just my secret diary. It's not even, anything I'd publish or whatever, right?
Right.
And I, amazingly enough, really did feel relief, even though nobody read it. Just my hand moving somehow released it onto the paper, and then, sigh of relief.
Yeah. You may not have told anyone, but you still said it. You got it out. You expressed it. I used to journal a lot when I was heavy on my depression, before it got more under control.
But what about anxiety? Because to me, that frustration was an overactivity in the brain. So especially looking back, that the Atarax made me feel better, which is a calming, an anxiety kind of medicine.
Mm-hmm.
That maybe instead of being depressed, meaning I lack activity in my brain, I went from frustrated to anxious.
Yep.
And then frustrated to anxious, you're still transitioning that it's one overactivity in the brain to another overactivity in the brain, but you're not getting rid of activity. And if your brain has too much activity, it's kind of like, how is it that we don't know? Do we need to just, vomit it on paper?
I like that phrase.
I mean, because I don't have those, what do they call it, where your thoughts keep repeating in your head? There's an actual medical term for that.
I'm not sure.
I'm talking about, that they say that bipolar and other stuff has, where you keep ruminating or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So the thought keeps circling. You keep rehashing that certain thing in your head, even if not verbally.
Right.
And I don't have those, but I did before brain surgery. So when they took that section of my brain, the rehashing stopped. Now we know I still have anxiety and I still have depression, but that certain things that used to happen don't happen anymore, to where now it's actually harder for different doctors to put their finger on what's my exact medical issues.
Right.
And because it's like, oh, well, they used to come with these certain things. I'm like, well, I don't have them, but I know that's what I have. I don't have those typical behaviors or symptoms, but I know that's the condition I have because I experienced this certain, whatever that I read an article about, right?
Right.
That I match with what I know I experience. But how many people actually follow those trends and as opposed to being like me, where they're like, they experience it different enough that they are harder to diagnose, and maybe they even end up being the ones that are like serial killers and all because they tried to see somebody and it just got that bad.
Right.
Because if they don't follow the trend, it's harder to diagnose them, which means if they don't have the right diagnosis or none at all, it's close to impossible for them to be treated, which means it's easier for them to get out of control. And that's where I tie this into how much of this, what we call the gun problem, right? Whatever side anybody sits on it with it, do we need to get rid of guns or do we need to limit what kind of guns people can have? There's something related to that in these massive shootings with mental health crisis.
Right.
And maybe the mental health people, like the National Association of Mental Health and all that, NAMI and stuff, maybe they don't necessarily, no, wait, NAMI's the nonprofit, but the one that's the government entity, like the NAM and stuff like that, National Institute of Health and stuff like that. These different organizations that are our government's central place of medical and mental health probably don't understand us as the ones that don't follow that certain trend. And if they don't understand us, how would they give the right curriculum to educate future doctors, for doctors to be able to understand us and know we actually have that whatever?
Right. Yep.
And I think that's another part of the problem. We go by what's a stereotype, what is the norm of somebody with something, and we don't see there can be so many cases outside of that norm, but it's still that certain condition that needs that certain treatment or therapy, medication, something.
Right. Exactly.
And I kind of see these are tied together between the mental health crisis and the issues related to them that's with the treatments not being available to everybody, tied with the big deal I've made about insurance. Because what about people with those that are labeled as kids by the school system, but because they were labeled, they can't get health insurance as adults because they're contract workers, or they're only able to work part-time, but they make enough income that they're not considered disabled, so they end up without health insurance, right?
Right.
And then so they got the label and they got a job that doesn't provide health insurance, and so they're uninsured. So that's another I see tying into it, the inequality in insurance. That's why some people can't even get insurance, much less have a means to get the help they need. No matter how many pills we see on the TV that are approved for depression, anxiety, bipolar, and all these others we see, they can market all they want, but if people can't get health insurance, they can know about they have a condition and not be able to get treatment, which then it can ask so they become the next serial killer because treatment wasn't accessible, as opposed to they didn't know they needed it.
Yep. There's a lot of stuff broken out there.
But do you see where all these are tied, though?
Absolutely.
They all tie around our overall point in this show, this whole mental health awareness of becoming aware of not just the existence of it, of mental health problems in the reality, but the different trends and issues associated. Like if we made, I think, making insurance available equally instead of just towards those that work for corporate America could help with crime, because at least those who need mental health treatment to control their behavior, because of different mood problems or trauma or something, that theirs could become more controlled if they willingly take medication. With the part we would have fixed is the lack of affordability or the lack of access.
Right, and then there would be
Does that mean not like
at least
resolve?
a better line of defense as to whether it was mental health that caused the social criteria or social crisis, or whether it really was a criminal act that caused the social crisis.
Well, and also trying to get this insurance to be accessible to everyone, so then there's the possibility that those criminal cases wouldn't happen, because those whoever would be on the medication to control their mental illnesses, at least for those that it's truly a mental illness to blame and not the person's credibility or accountability.
Right.
I mean, that won't fix all of them, because there are real cases where somebody just goes berserk,
Right.
get mad or something. But even if it's getting mad, how many times does it take before at least getting them in anger management classes, or say that we put them in jail, but we make anger management classes available behind bars so that then they can work through the anger while they're serving their time, and then be more hopefully resolved of the anger issues by the time they're released, assuming they're not doing life in jail.
Right.
And then maybe people would learn from that because of the different training. And I just see all these different things you can say are political, or they're just debatable, or they're so many things we can describe it. But I see that all these, whichever side we each decide to be on of these different topics, they come together to shape American mental health, the industry, the individuals, and the general public. Because if it affects me and it affects you, it affects a lot of people that are around the two of us, right?
Exactly.
Because we encounter the general public related to our jobs, if nothing else. So,
True enough.
in that case, just impacting 2 lives, we are impacting many lives. So imagine what it is as a globe when you got, the tens of thousands, millions, I don't know how many of us that have something going on.
Probably more than are diagnosed.
Oh, way more. Because I'm saying about the insurance thing and the lack of equality as far as access to health insurance. There's probably plenty of people that have them and never been able to see somebody.
I think there's even tons that do have insurance but just deny that they have an issue.
And that's true too. I know some family members that have gone through trauma, and the rest of the family will say that they have PTSD, but they themselves say there's nothing wrong with them and there's nothing wrong with the rest of the world. And I'm not saying who that is, but still, that even in my own family, I've seen this is somebody who has health insurance, but it's everyone else's problem and not that person's problem.
Exactly.
But there's agreement with the rest of us, so it's, then again, insurance won't fix everything, but will anything at all fix everything versus needing to change multiple things to impact the one thing from different directions?
Yep.
Because see, that says insurance alone won't do it.
No.
But it'll probably improve it because of those that don't have it as to why they can't get the help. But it wouldn't solve like that person's case. But then there's other people like that it may be more beneficial to have, say, TV shows about mental health and the thoughts we get for different conditions that are defined as abnormal. So hopefully that person becomes aware.
Yep.
So like looking at that, we would need more than just making insurance available, but actual awareness, like say TV shows that are passive about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because most TV shows that have anything to do with mental health show us as criminals. There's not anything that actually is, I mean, as far as I've seen in the Houston area, there's not any show I've seen that actually brings awareness that it's a real life struggle and that we're not just a bunch of people that go behind bars because it's on first 48 hours or something, right?
Right.
And I think that's part of the stigma of why people think of being mentally ill, which is full of excuses for doing crime. Because of that trend of TV shows have us as criminals,
Yep.
and otherwise not even about mental health.
Definitely.
Because as far as I see it, every stigma has a cause.
Yeah.
Somebody or something gave that message.
Yeah. And whether that
And that
message is
message-
educated or just, what's the word? Biased, makes a big difference.
And the reality of why then go into the whole argument thing about mental health and whether it's the insurance, the guns, it's whatever, that goes into the need of awareness, but also education about it. But I mean, education that's outside of a college. Because so many people need to hear about it and learn about it to understand it. But then they don't go to school because, say, they're professionals like you and me that already are in their field. You know what I'm saying? Or maybe they're just one of those that's in their 20s and believes that college isn't the thing for them. But that doesn't mean they don't need to know about that.
Right.
But so many of us are out of the school system and need to know that. So that's why I agree that there needs to be some kind of education and the clarity of some trustworthy professor or public speaker or researcher or somebody that's credentialed to say these are stigmas, these are not the reality of people with whatever, do whatever, or don't do whatever.
Right. Well, we are coming up on like 45 minutes or so. Where's your next book coming out? I know you've got some stuff coming up.
So it's going to first be released on Amazon, which you can find my exact page on Amazon by going to Google and looking up books by Jennifer A. Whitaker. And my last name is spelled Whitaker. So that's books by Jennifer A. Whitaker. And when you look that up on Google, you will find an Amazon page that has a bunch of books by me, and that's where you can like and subscribe to be the first to be alerted of any new releases that I put out, because I always do Amazon publishing before I send it out to the other 40,000 stores. But if you're one of those that's anti-Amazon, as I know those people exist, then it would be about another 2 weeks, so about 3 to 4 weeks from now before I release it on a publisher that sends it to 40,000 places, which would include Barnes & Noble on their website, Books A Million on their website. I don't know if Borders is still around, but basically all those major chains and so many other small business bookstores that have websites linked with the publisher that sends it to 40,000 places. And that includes places that are overseas and in other countries on the other side of the world. And it is not even limited to the U.S. And I know that because if y'all probably heard, my bestsellers sell more copies in Europe than anywhere else in the world, even though I'm right here in Houston, Texas, that's in the United States. So wherever you are, there's going to be somewhere online that you can find it and get it mailed to your address of choice. And that's going to be, if you haven't heard, Lobectomy, Volume 2. It's called Lobectomy, Best Decision of My Life. And that's the second volume in a series about how I overcame epilepsy from being one of the worst 30 cases in the country in 2020 and 2019, when I couldn't even leave the house without having someone else near. And then now here we're talking about me roaming at coffee shops and all these places. So that's where you can learn the second volume in the first 15 months of my freedom and how I got it. I also want to announce that there will be a podcast coming up soon that will be by Aspire Women for Excellence, which some of y'all have heard of because I tell y'all all the time about Lady Kendra's Bible studies and how that's where I go to do my worship and Bible studies from 10 to 11 Central on Monday mornings. My way of uniting with God and fellowshipping with other female Christians. But it's on Zoom, so you can look up Aspire Women for Excellence. And if I remember correctly, her website is Aspire, ASPIRE, Women, FOR, Excellence.com. And there you can find the different events we have, different Bible studies and networking and other stuff like that. But that's another place you'll find me. But the big news is that she is now starting to make a podcast. Apparently there's something I've done. There's something I've done with mine that has got her motivated. And as hard as I tried at the beginning of my podcasting career to get her to join me and be a partner, she finally decided there's something going on and she needs to get into this whole podcasting thing. So I will let y'all know.
Jennifer the influencer. Woohoo!
Yes, I am. Everybody says that. That's why people tell me when I'm depressed that I can't hurt myself, because there's people that need me to influence them and to guide them in the right direction.
Yep.
But that said, Lady Kendra in the Aspire Women for Excellence.com is about to open her own podcast, and I will let y'all know what the show is called once I find out, and once I also know what will be her day and time that she will be running her show each week, and or if it's weekly, monthly, or whatever. But I will update y'all when I find out those details in the coming future. It should be by the end of June, I'm expecting, at least my understanding at this point. Y'all can stay tuned to hear in the next 30 minutes John Tarr's show called Jaws Christ Talk. Back to you.
All right. Well, that about wraps it up for us today. Again, we'd like to give out the special thanks to Lawrence Wingate of Wingate TV, Marcus Hart of Transform You Media, Zach Clayton of the PAC Channel, and Jay Stoyan of Disability Channel. Please be sure to visit their sites and as well as ours, and like, share, and subscribe to our social media pages or groups or our YouTube channel or wherever it is you happen to find us. We appreciate you being here, and we'll be back next week. Let's see, what is next week? June 18th? No, 19th. We'll be back next week, June 19th, with another podcast for mental health awareness with JAWS, Jennifer A. Whitaker's JAWS Coffee Chat. Until then, everybody, take care. We wish you a productive and enjoyable week. Thanks. We'll see you soon.